Chapter 1. Return to a Changed World. It was a quiet morning in Godric's Hollow, where Harry Potter and Ginny Weasley had built their new home. The summer sun streamed through the window, casting golden rays on Harry's face. He blinked and sat up in bed, aware of Ginny's soft snoring beside him. Their lives had changed drastically since the Battle of Hogwarts, but here in their new house, everything finally seemed to be falling into place. Harry got up and walked to the window. He looked out over the lush gardens and the picturesque village. It was hard to imagine that the world outside this tranquil village had ever been so full of danger and darkness. He thought about his friends, Ron and Hermione, who were busy rebuilding their lives. Ron was now working at Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, and Hermione was active at the Ministry of Magic, fighting for equal rights for all magical creatures. The silence was broken by a loud knock on the door downstairs. Harry looked around, surprised by the early visit. He quickly walked down the stairs and opened the front door, where he found Andromeda Tonks and Teddy standing. "Teddy wanted to see you, Harry," said Andromeda with a smile. Little Teddy, with his bright blue hair and mischievous eyes, looked up at Harry with a wide grin. Harry knelt down and hugged his godson. "Good to see you, Teddy. Want to come in?" Andromeda nodded gratefully and led Teddy inside. As they settled in the living room, Harry felt a wave of warmth and responsibility. Teddy was now 6 years old and looked more like his parents, Remus and Nymphadora, every day. Harry had sworn to take good care of him, and he took that promise seriously. "How are you doing, Andromeda?" Harry asked as he poured a cup of tea. "We're doing well, Harry," Andromeda replied. "We're trying to rebuild our lives. Teddy misses his parents, but he's doing well here." Before Harry could say anything, there was another knock on the door. Curious, Harry walked back to the front door and opened it. To his great surprise, there was an owl on the doorstep with a letter in its beak. Harry recognized the owl immediately. It was an official owl from Hogwarts. Harry took the letter from the owl, noting the Hogwarts seal on the envelope. His mind raced with possibilities as he opened it, revealing a letter from Professor McGonagall. "Dear Harry, I hope this letter finds you well. There have been some unusual occurrences at Hogwarts that I believe require your attention. Given your experience and unique perspective, I would greatly appreciate it if you could visit the school at your earliest convenience. Best regards, Professor Minerva McGonagall." Harry felt a mix of curiosity and concern. What could be happening at Hogwarts now? He knew he needed to discuss this with Ginny and his friends. "Who is it?" Ginny's voice called from upstairs. "It's a letter from McGonagall," Harry replied, heading back to the living room where Andromeda and Teddy were waiting. "I think I need to call Ron and Hermione." Ginny, now fully awake, joined him downstairs, reading the letter over his shoulder. "It sounds serious. Let's get everyone together and figure out what's going on." Harry sent messages to Ron and Hermione, asking them to come over as soon as possible. He then returned to the living room, where Andromeda was watching Teddy play with a toy broomstick. "I hope everything is okay," Andromeda said gently. "We'll find out soon," Harry replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Within an hour, Ron and Hermione had arrived, their expressions mirroring Harry's own mix of concern and curiosity. They all gathered in the kitchen, the letter from McGonagall lying in the center of the table like a silent sentinel. "What's going on, Harry?" Ron asked, leaning forward. Harry handed him the letter. As Ron and Hermione read it, Ginny poured everyone a cup of tea. "We need to figure out what this means," she said. Hermione was the first to speak. "If McGonagall is asking for our help, it must be something significant. She wouldn't reach out unless it was truly urgent." Ron nodded. "But what could it be? Everything seemed fine at Hogwarts the last time we were there." Harry thought back to their time at the school, the memories both sweet and bitter. Whatever it is, we owe it to her and to Hogwarts to help. Ginny put a reassuring hand on Harry's shoulder. "We'll figure this out together, like we always do." As they sat around the table, each of them began to share their own memories of Hogwarts, bringing the past to life. Harry leaned back in his chair, a soft smile forming on his lips. "I remember the first time I flew on a broomstick during Madam Hooch's lesson. I had never felt so free and alive. It was that day I realized that Hogwarts was going to change my life forever." He paused, his eyes distant as he recalled the sensation of wind in his hair and the thrill of flight. And then there was the Triwizard Tournament. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. I learned so much about myself and what I was capable of. Hermione nodded, her face lighting up with a fond smile. I remember the Yule Ball during the Triwizard Tournament. It was the first time I felt truly noticed, not just for my brains but for who I was. Victor Crumb asked me to be his date, and it was magical. She laughed softly, shaking her head. And then there were all the times we spent in the library, researching spells and finding answers to mysteries. Those were some of my favorite moments. Ron grinned, leaning forward with a mischievous glint in his eyes. One of my favorite memories has to be when we played chess during our first year. I never thought I'd be good at anything academic, but winning that game against the giant chess set was incredible. It showed me that I had strengths of my own. He chuckled, looking at Harry and Hermione. And let's not forget all the times we snuck out at night with the invisibility cloak. Those adventures were the best, even if they got us into trouble more often than not. As the evening turned into night, the group had a plan. They would leave for Hogwarts first thing in the morning. Harry felt a renewed sense of purpose, mixed with the familiar anxiety that came with the unknown. "We faced worse," Ron said, trying to lighten the mood. "We'll handle this too." Harry smiled, feeling grateful for his friends. "Together we can face anything." The next morning, with the first light of dawn, Harry, Ginny, Ron, and Hermione stood ready to leave. As they stepped out of the house, Harry took one last look at the peaceful village of Godric's Hollow. The world had changed, but their resolve remained as strong as ever. "To Hogwarts," Harry said, and with a collective nod, they apparated to the school that had been the cornerstone of their lives. Chapter 2. Reopening Old Wounds. Arriving at Hogwarts, Harry, Ginny, Ron, and Hermione arrived at the edge of the Forbidden Forest, choosing to apparate to this familiar yet eerie location. The journey to the castle had always been a source of excitement, but today a palpable tension hung in the air. "Do you feel that?" Hermione asked, glancing around. The air seemed thicker, and the trees appeared darker than usual. Ron nodded. "It doesn't feel right. Something is off." Harry led the group forward, his eyes scanning for any signs of danger. "We need to stay alert. McGonagall wouldn't have called us unless it was serious." As they walked, Harry reflected on their method of travel. Apparition, or apparating, was a magical means of teleportation, allowing witches and wizards to instantly travel from one place to another. It was a highly useful but complex skill that required precise concentration and a clear mental image of the destination. A slight mistake could result in splinching, where a part of the body was left behind. Despite its risks, for experienced wizards like Harry and his friends, it was the fastest way to travel. Strange encounters. As they walked along the edge of the forest, Harry suddenly heard rustling in the bushes. He drew his wand, his senses on high alert. "Who's there?" A figure emerged from the shadows. It was a centaur, Firenze. "Harry Potter," he said with a concerned look. "The forest speaks of darkness returning." A cold shiver ran down Harry's spine. "What do you mean? Firenze?" "There are signs of an ancient power returning," Firenze replied. "Be cautious and trust no one." Before Harry could ask more questions, Firenze disappeared back into the shadows. Harry shared what he had heard with the others, and they decided to quicken their pace. A little later, as they neared the castle, they heard an eerie scream. Ginny grabbed Harry's arm, her eyes wide with fear. "What was that?" Harry turned and saw a Dementor gliding through the air. "Expecto Patronum," he shouted, and a silver stag appeared, driving the Dementor away. "It's getting stranger by the minute," Ron muttered as they continued walking. Upon arriving in the Great Hall, they were greeted by a visibly anxious Professor McGonagall. "Harry, it's good that you're here. We have much to discuss." They were led to her office, where she invited them to sit. "Reports have come in about strange activities in the Forbidden Forest and around the castle. And it's not just here. Other magical places are reporting disturbances as well." Hermione frowned. "Does it have to do with the scream and the Dementor we just encountered?" McGonagall nodded. "There are signs that darkness is returning, not in the form of Voldemort, but something equally dangerous. We don't know exactly what it is yet, but we must be prepared." Harry felt a knot tighten in his stomach. What can we do to help? We need all our strengths, McGonagall said. Investigations must be conducted, allies must be warned, and we must be ready for the worst. Hermione immediately headed to the library, her mind racing with possibilities. As she walked in, she was greeted by Madame Pince, the stern librarian. "Good to see you, Hermione," Madame Pince said, her expression softening slightly. "What brings you back to Hogwarts?" "There's some trouble brewing, Madame Pince. I need to look into ancient prophecies and dark magic," Hermione replied. Madame Pince nodded and led Hermione to a section filled with dusty, old tomes. "Start here. These books contain some of the oldest and most obscure prophecies." Hermione thanked her and began her research. Hours passed as she sifted through countless pages looking for any clues. Finally, she stumbled upon a prophecy that spoke of the return of a dark power and a ritual that could repel it. Just then, Madame Pince approached with a curious expression. "Find anything useful?" "I think so," Hermione said, showing her the book. "This prophecy might be what we're looking for, but it's very cryptic." Madame Pince peered at the pages. "Be careful, Hermione. Dark magic is dangerous and unpredictable." Meanwhile, Harry made his way to Hagrid's hut, eager to catch up with his old friend and learn about any unusual happenings in the Forbidden Forest. As he approached, he noticed a strange, unfamiliar creature in the yard. "Hagrid, what's that?" Harry called out. Hagrid emerged from his hut, beaming. "Ah, Harry, good to see ye. This is a niffler beak. Found it wandering near the forest. Ain't it something?" The niffler beak, a curious cross between a niffler and a hippogriff, had shiny fur and large, expressive eyes. It seemed both playful and cautious as it studied Harry. "It's certainly something," Harry said, smiling. "Hagrid, we need to talk. Have you noticed anything strange in the forest lately?" Hagrid's expression turned serious. "Aye, there's been some odd goings-on. Creatures acting up, shadows moving where they shouldn't. I reckon something dark is stirring." Harry nodded, feeling the weight of Hagrid's words. "We need to figure out what's happening before it's too late." Ron, on the other hand, took to patrolling the castle grounds. As he walked through the dimly lit corridors, memories of their school years flooded back. The castle was both familiar and hauntingly different in its quiet state. Suddenly, he heard a noise coming from an unused classroom. He approached cautiously, wand at the ready. Peering inside, he saw a figure rummaging through old desks. "Who's there?" Ron demanded. The figure turned, revealing a young witch. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to startle you. I'm a new staff member just trying to find some supplies." Ron lowered his wand but remained cautious. "This isn't exactly the best time to be sneaking around. What's your name?" "Alara," she replied, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "Professor McGonagall asked me to help out, but I got lost." Ron nodded, but something about the situation still felt off. "Be careful, Alara. There are strange things happening around here." As he continued his patrol, Ron couldn't shake the feeling that Alara might be hiding something. He made a mental note to keep an eye on her. Later that evening, Harry, Hermione, and Ron met in Professor McGonagall's office to share their findings. The room was dimly lit, the fire crackling softly as they settled into their chairs. Hermione spoke first, showing them the ancient prophecy she found. "This prophecy mentions the return of a dark power and a ritual that might stop it, but the details are vague." Harry nodded, then recounted his conversation with Hagrid. "Hagrid has noticed strange behavior in the creatures of the Forbidden Forest. Something dark is definitely stirring." Ron added his own findings, his voice tense. "I met a new staff member named Alara. She seems suspicious, and I think she might be hiding something." At the mention of Alara's name, McGonagall's face turned pale. "Alara? Are you sure, Ron?" Ron nodded. "Positive. I spoke to her just a few hours ago." McGonagall's eyes were wide with shock. "Alara was one of the students who died during the Battle of Hogwarts. She shouldn't be here." A silence fell over the room as the gravity of McGonagall's words sank in. Hermione was the first to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "If Ron saw her, there must be some kind of glitch in time. This could mean anything, even that Voldemort still exists in some parallel form and can influence our world." Harry felt a cold dread settle over him. "We need to figure out what's going on, and fast. If there's a time glitch, it could have catastrophic consequences." McGonagall nodded, regaining her composure. We must proceed with extreme caution. Gather all the information you can. This could be more dangerous than anything we've faced before." With a sense of urgency, the group left McGonagall's office, each of them determined to uncover the truth behind the mysterious events and protect their world from the encroaching darkness. Will be continued.